there's a lot Congress can do, and hopefully Congress is going to take action to ensure that that things can be stable for energy producers and also for our economy. There's something called the Congressional Review Act, which allows a new Congress to take a look back, basically a 60-day look back at regulations that a prior presidential administration put into place and finalized. And Congress can pass a joint resolution of disapproval, up or down vote on that. And what that does is basically says, we disapprove of this regulation from, stick in with the regulus, from the Environmental Protection Agency, and they will cite it. Now, if both houses of Congress pass that and it's sent to the president and the president signs it, it becomes actually what happens is that regulation is null and void and of no effect. So Congress can do that. And then there are other provisions as well.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, my name is David Fromm and I'm the host for the American Potential podcast. Energy is the backbone of the American economy and our way of life. Without reliable energy, you couldn't listen to this podcast or watch your favorite TV show when you want. Energy keeps the lights on in your home and lets you heat or cool, or just so you can stay comfortable. Diesel helps farmers grow our food, and trucks use fuel to deliver that food to stores so you can keep food on the table. And as new technology emerges and drives up energy demand, we must increase production to keep up, which is why we can't rely on just one source. We need an all-of-the-above approach to ensure affordable, reliable energy for all. On day one, President Trump took action by rolling back Biden-era restrictions that were stifling the energy industry. And today we're going to talk about how we get back to energy independence and put America first. We're also going to discuss how even with these federal changes, there are some states that have policies in place that make the cost of energy higher in their state. I want to welcome today's guest to the podcast, Faith Burns, who is the Energy Policy Fellow for Americans for Prosperity. Welcome back, Faith.
Thank you. Glad to be here, David.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure. I'm thrilled to talk about one of our favorite topics. I mean, just in the last number of weeks, months, we've had CEOs of of natural gas companies and coal companies, and a lot of folks talking about an issue that's at the top of a lot of people's minds because we care about how much stuff costs. So anyway, just to start out, maybe you can kind of take us back to what was the energy industry like before Biden took office, and then what were some of the restrictions that the administration put in place?
Mm-hmm. Well, before Biden went into office, if you remember, President Trump had his first term. And President Trump's first term was basically consumed with attempting to reverse a lot of the requirements that the Obama administration had put in place. So you had Trump coming in and trying to do executive orders and reproposing regulations and finalizing them that would make it actually easier for energy to be produced. And then once Trump left, Biden comes in and he basically does a reversal of what Trump did. So now what we've got is President Trump coming in 2.0 and attempting to reverse some of the previous Biden regs that were put in. So that's that's the playing field and that's the landscape we're looking at right now.
Well, it really seems like a ping pong match. Like it goes back and forth as to whichever administration is in office, which seems like it'd be a tough place for the energy industry to be able to plan. Why does the executive branch, or how does the executive branch kind of have so much control over the energy industry?
Well, it's interesting because the executive branch and the administrative agencies only have the power that is delegated to them by Congress. So if you see a lot of regulations coming out of the various agencies, which we do, it is because there's very likely in one of the statutes that Congress has said to an agency, here, you implement this. They have given that agency the authority to implement regulations and to carry out their directives. Now, sometimes the agencies go beyond the scope of what Congress has allowed them to do. But in many instances, that's why you see so many regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, the Department of Transportation. It's because they have certain delegated authorities. That's the reason why. And in as I indicated, in some instances, they had just almost gone bananas with their authority, and they've exceeded that authority. And some of the energy companies have challenged that in court, which they should do.
Yeah, we've talked to a number of our colleagues who are working to battle that overreach from so many administrative agencies. It's actually really kind of a cool time, I think, in our nation where there might be like real progress in reining in that runaway administrative authority. So I'm kind of excited for that. Hopefully, what do you think with the new administration coming into office? What do you think will be some of the changes made to the energy industry?
Well, we're already seeing a lot of agencies. And first of all, what President Trump did when he came in, that was obviously very smart and practical and very wise. He issued a number of executive orders. All of them do not concern energy, but some of them do. And what basically those executive orders say is don't send any new or proposed regulations over to the Federal Register to be proposed or finalized until someone from the Trump administration is able to look over and review those proposals, which makes sense. And also, he has directed the secretaries of all the agencies to do an analysis of all the regs within their department, within their jurisdiction, to see what proposals are out there that actually hinder energy production. So if there's any regulation out there, no matter what agency it comes from, if it places an undue burden on energy production or usage, that regulation is supposed to be looked at, evaluated, and seeing if they could be revised or completely revoked. So it's basically what the president is doing is getting a lay of the land and making sure that everything is covered. And I will say, having read through some of those executive orders, every I is dotted and every T is crossed. They're very comprehensive. They're very good executive orders. So the mandate from the president to all the agencies is look at what's within your authority and your jurisdiction and see about cleaning it up so we can, in fact, get energy abundance and we can get things rolling.
Yeah, wow, that's really encouraging. So it seems like a lot of the executive orders are really concentrated on understanding what's out there and making sure that it's right sized and kind of in line with trying to promote energy abundance. I mean, it sounds like a great start to me. Are there any actions from the newly confirmed secretaries of agencies? You know, for instance, like Secretary Burgum at Interior, like what have they done or signaled that they might be doing?
Right. Well, first, in one of the first acts that Secretary Burgum did at Interior, he issued a secretary's order. And that order basically dovetailed what the president had told him to do in one of the president's executive orders. So Burgum has basically told his staff at Interior, this is what we're going to do. He set out a number of items in there that will complement and actually carry out what the president's mandate is. There's one item that's specifically related to Alaska, and there are a number of secretary's orders and land orders that are going to be reversed, that have been reversed, and they're taking a look at every single component within the executive order to see what needs to be done in Interior. Basically, the same thing happening at the Department of Energy. Secretary Wright issued a memorandum to the department to look at a number of things. And basically, Secretary Wright's memorandum was talking about that net zero policies basically won't be followed anymore because they cost people money and it's not necessarily conducive to grid reliability. So we have to take a look at the reliability of the electric grid. And also, Secretary Wright's order mentioned common sense, that we have to look at this from a practical common sense point of view and standpoint, and that's what this administration is going to do. In addition, another item in Secretary Wright's order was basically the pause on liquid natural gas exports. He indicated that's going to return to normal order. So that's going to be taken care of. Now, I will say, just a few days ago, the comment period on that LNG study that had been initiated during the Biden administration, that the comment period on that study has been extended out an additional 30 days. So I expect a number of entities to be submitting comments on that particular item to the Department of Energy. So I'm fully confident that Secretary Wright can handle matters at the Department of Energy that will actually help energy production as we go forth.
That's encouraging. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that you said there, the most mind-blowing thing, is that a leading member of government said that we need to apply common sense to some of our policies.
I agree. And it shouldn't be mind-blowing, but it is. And because those of us who have been out in the world and operated outside of the Beltway understand that most folks operate under a common sense sort of business model, that it needs to make sense. And somehow Washington has escaped that concept. But it has not escaped Secretary Wright, which I'm grateful for.
That's wonderful. Hey, just kind of maybe a civics lesson real fast from you. Clearly, interior and energy play major roles when it comes to energy policy and production in the country. What's the differentiate? Like, what are the different things that each agency kind of is responsible for?
So interior is primarily responsible for the management of federal lands. So you've got vast amounts of land in the country that are owned by the federal government. And most of those are under the purview of the Department of Energy. Some are under the purview of the Department of Agriculture if it's Forest Service land, because the Forest Service is housed within USDA. But if you're talking about any activity on federal land, that means drilling for oil and gas or mining of coal, the Department of the Interior is primarily going to have responsibility for that. Now, dovetail that with the Department of Energy. And what they do over there is they are in charge of like energy efficiency standards for appliances. They're in charge of making sure that the electric grid is reliable. Now, that most of that is handled under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, but FERC is actually within the Department of Energy for basically logistical purposes. That's where they're housed. So there are distinctions there. And there's another agency that has a significant amount to do with energy production, and that's the Environmental Protection Agency. And here's why. Because EPA is in charge of a number of environmental statutes, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, a number of statutes that control waste cleanup and disposal. And basically, anytime you move dirt for any project anywhere, the Clean Water Act is going to be implicated. So EPA sticks its regulations into a lot of things concerning energy construction. If you have to build a power plant, if you have to put up a derrick to go out and explore and to drill, EPA is involved as well. So there are a number of agencies, and it's almost a moving target. So folks need to be well aware and apprised of everything they're looking at before they start a project. And obviously, folks who have been in the energy business understand what they have to complete. So there's a lot of different moving parts, which requires a lot of competent professionals and raises the cost of energy production.
Yeah, it's got to be hard enough to be regulated by one body, but to have a number of powerful entities regulating your business, and then having that change every 4 years, every 8 years, it's got to be really stabilizing to people who are trying to operate in that industry. Which brings me to my next question. Executive orders aren't permanent, and that's what we've been talking about right now. Is there anything Congress can do to keep America energy independent?
Yes, there's a lot Congress can do, and hopefully Congress is going to take action to ensure that that things can be stable for energy producers and also for our economy. There's something called the Congressional Review Act, which allows a new Congress to take a look back, basically a 60-day look back at regulations that a prior presidential administration put into place and finalized. And Congress can pass a joint resolution of disapproval, up or down vote on that. And what that does is basically says, we disapprove of this regulation from stick in with the Regius, from the Environmental Protection Agency, and they will cite it. Now, if both houses of Congress pass that, and it's sent to the president, and the president signs it, it becomes actually what happens is that regulation is null and void and of no effect. So Congress can do that. And then there are other provisions as well. If Congress wanted to take back some of the authority they had delegated to some of these federal agencies, they can do that as well. And we're hopeful that with the House and Senate both in conservative hands these days, that we can get something reasonable out of the Hill to be sent to the president to sign so that our energy policy doesn't go back and forth like a ping pong, as you had indicated earlier.
Yeah. So, obviously you're a policy expert in this area, especially I'm sure in a lot of the federal legislation. How much of a difference do you think it makes for Congress to be the one making the policy here rather than it being executed at the executive level?
Well, the thing about the difference basically between a statute and an executive order, a statute is there until it's amended or if it's overturned by the courts. I mean, it's going to be there, and that's the law of the land. What an executive order does, basically, it's a directive from the president to the federal agencies that this is what they have to do. So, and again, new administration can come in, and a president can revoke the executive orders of the previous administration, and that's gone. In fact, one of the executive orders that President Trump signed, I believe it was on his first day, revoked at least 60 executive orders from prior administrations and also revoked a number of presidential memoranda. So that is the executive actions, as you indicate, that's limited to a certain period, but it's more stable and more durable if a statute is changed by Congress.
Yeah. So it's definitely preferable. Well, I mean, so we've been talking nationally, and I understand that's a huge driver when it comes to energy, but there are some issues at the state level. One issue, actually, I don't know if you may know this, but I live in the suburbs of Chicago, so in the Illinois area, and I'm acutely aware of the right of first refusal, or ROFR legislation. So maybe could you talk to us about like what is ROFR legislation and what would it do?
Sure. Okay. In fact, a number of states are dealing with it. Right of first refusal is basically, for electric utility companies, is basically just think of a right of first refusal in any other normal business contract you would enter into. So if you have a right of first refusal, that means you get first chance to say, yeah, I'd like that piece of land. Would you give me the right of first refusal to bid on it? And you may get that. So in the electric utility space, what we're talking about is the rights of incumbent electric utilities or transmission providers to be able to get first dibs on building new lines. So essentially, if they get first dibs, that means no bid contracts, which means that if you have no bid contracts, then that cuts out competition, and theoretically, that could raise cost. And costs are passed on to ratepayers. So right of first refusal is a huge issue. In fact, there are a number of states that have passed right of refusal laws, and some of those have been overturned by the courts. In fact, the Texas right of first refusal statute that was passed a few years ago, that was overturned by a federal court for provisions in the non-ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas region for there. There's a ROFR statute in Indiana that, last I checked, it was subject to a temporary injunction by a federal court. There is a right of first refusal statute in Montana, and there is a bill this session to repeal the Montana ROFR statute. So it's a huge issue, because if you're an electric utility company and you don't have to bid out your projects, the question is, what's the incentive for you to keep costs low? So that's the argument. And we at Americans for Prosperity, we believe that ratepayers, that those who paid the bill ultimately, should have the benefits of competition. That's the American way. That's how we should do things. And non-competitive bidding is actually not bidding, and that gives an unfair advantage to those who are the incumbents. So it's a huge issue, and there's arguments on both sides, but it's not going away next week, I can tell you that.
Well, it seems to be such an example of cronyism that we see. It's in so many different states. And I think what's one of the really remarkable things when it comes to these right of first refusal laws is that you see them moving and being passed in right-leaning states, like politically Republican-dominated states. I know our neighbors to the west in Iowa are dealing with this, and up in Wisconsin, and then Illinois being a left of center state. Also, we see it's because I assume it's because the energy providers in those states are usually one of the most powerful lobbying shops and one of the most influential industries in the state legislature. But they keep coming and they keep popping up in all these different places. And it's one of the most anti-market cronyist policies I've really seen in quite a while. And I think it's really terrible that they keep moving. I'm really proud of the work that we're doing to try to fight them. But they just seem like so anti-market.
Well, and there's a lot of money at stake. I mean, make no mistake that when there's a lot of money at stake, there's going to be big fights. But there are some things that have happened at the federal level recently that actually puts into question the entire cost allocation setup. Back in May of last year, May 13th, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, issued an order. It's called Order 1920. And basically, it discusses a lot of things about regional transmission planning and cost allocation. Now, that order has been appealed. And there are a number of appeals challenges to that were filed all across the country in various federal circuits, but they were all consolidated at the Fourth Circuit in Richmond, Virginia. So just down the road here from where I am, a court down there is under their jurisdiction. But in late, it was either October or November, just not that long ago, FERC issued an order on remand, and they changed that order somewhat. And that's now Order 1920-A. So the bottom line to all that is that at the federal level, the issue of cost allocation is still up in the air and it's not finalized yet. So if anybody tells you, Grover's this or that, right now, honestly, we don't know the final answer because it's still being litigated in court.
Well, what are some energy policies, if any, hopefully, that you are excited about with the new administration coming in?
Well, like we said, common sense. I'm excited about common sense being entered into the equation.
That's a good choice.
Well, I am, because it's a number of years ago, I worked for another place and we were lobbying an environmental regulation that was proposed at the end of the Clinton administration, and it was horrific. But we were able to put together some comments and make our case to the EPA, and it ended up with a regulation that was livable and doable, because I think I was working for an agriculture group, and as you know, folks in the ag world have a whole lot of common sense, and that's how they operate. So hopefully that's what we'll get from this administration. And there's room for common sense at FERC. There's room for common sense at EPA, at Energy, at Interior, at Transportation, at every single agency. Because at the end of the day, the federal government actually works for us. We pay their salaries, and Congress works for us as well. And let's hope Congress, too, can have some common sense in what they pass.
Amen. So I just want to ask you one more question before we leave. When you step back, we're talking about a lot of different policies and at the state and certainly the national level. If the policies that we would like to see move forward are realized and other, common sense is restored, look in your short to midterm crystal ball. What does that look like for Americans and American businesses?
So I think it would look like energy production continuing, more liquefied natural gas exports. And when we have a lot of supply, when we have plenty of gasoline, plenty of natural gas, our prices can go down, because the ultimate goal is, as you had indicated at the top of the show, energy is the backbone of our economy. And if we have high energy prices, we cannot get other prices down. The cost of groceries are directly related to the cost of energy. The cost of everything that we buy at the department store is related to the cost of energy. So if we have an abundant energy supply and we get that under control, then I think our economy has a better chance of coming back into normal. And so we don't have to pay $6, $8, $9 for a dozen eggs. So that's what I hope occurs.
Yeah, me too. Well, I think, fortunately, there's some indications that we're able to move in that direction. So, Faith, I want to thank you for leading this fight for Americans for Prosperity and providing us with the intellectual ammunition, especially to go and try to make this case.
Thank you. Glad to do it and glad to be on your show.
Thanks so much. Well, folks, as Faith was saying, policies that make it harder for our energy industry to operate really ends up causing Americans to pay more for the lifestyle that they're used to. And that's why when it comes to energy, we truly need an energy strategy that's an all the above, an energy abundance strategy, because what may work in one part of the country, may not work in another. Well, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.